Hey guys, tonight we wander into a place that looks bright, grand, and full of wonder, but quietly hides something much darker beneath its polished surface. You find yourself standing at the edge of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, where the air hums with excitement, electric lights glow like something out of a dream, and thousands of visitors move around you in awe. It's the kind of place where the future feels close enough to touch. And yet, you probably won't survive this. Not to worry, just a little joke to keep things light before we step into something less light. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me your location and the local time where you're listening from. I always love seeing where these late night journeys reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward into the fairgrounds, and immediately it's overwhelming in the best way. Towering white buildings stretch out before you, gleaming under the glow of newly installed electric lights. This place isn't just an exhibition, it's a statement. They call it the White City, and for good reason. Everything feels impossibly clean, impossibly perfect. There's music somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of laughter, the creak of machinery powering inventions people have never seen before. You pass by enormous displays, early automobiles, mechanical wonders, even the first Ferris wheel rising like a giant steel circle against the skyline. It's a real historical moment. The Ferris wheel here is one of the fair's biggest attractions, designed to rival the Eiffel Tower from Paris. And as you look up at it slowly turning, carrying tiny silhouettes of people into the sky, you feel that strange mix of excitement and unease. Because while everyone around you is looking up, you start to feel like maybe you should be looking somewhere else. The city of Chicago itself feels alive tonight, crowded, loud, bursting at the seams with visitors from all over the country. Hotels are packed, boarding houses are full. People are desperate for somewhere to stay, anywhere to rest after long days wandering the fair. And that's where your attention begins to drift, just a little off the main path. You notice a building, not part of the fair itself, but not too far from it either. It doesn't shine like the others. In fact, it looks almost ordinary, maybe even forgettable. A three-story structure with a somewhat awkward design, like it was built without a clear plan. But something about it lingers in your mind. It's strange, because in a place full of wonders, this is the one thing that doesn't quite fit. No glowing lights, no grand columns, just a quiet, slightly unsettling presence. You try to brush it off. After all, Chicago is full of buildings like this. Boarding houses, shops, small hotels, they blend together. There's nothing unusual about needing more space for visitors. In fact, it's completely normal. But then you overhear a conversation. Two people passing by, their voices low, almost casual. One of them mentions a doctor, someone who owns a hotel nearby, a polite man, well-spoken, always smiling, the kind of person you'd trust without thinking twice. You don't catch the name clearly, not yet. Still, it sticks with you. You keep walking, letting yourself get pulled back into the fair's energy, bright lights, laughter, the smell of food drifting through the air. There's even a sense of pride here. America showing off its progress, its innovation, its future. It's meant to be a celebration of human achievement, and in many ways it is. But here's the thing. Sometimes the most dangerous places aren't the ones that look dark and threatening. Sometimes they're the ones that feel safe, welcoming, almost too perfect. You pass by another group of visitors, this time a family. They're talking about where to stay. Hotels are expensive, rooms are scarce. Someone suggests a place just outside the main fairgrounds, a hotel run by a doctor. Affordable, convenient, respectable. It's odd how often that detail comes up. A doctor. That should make you feel safe, right? You imagine him for a moment. Clean-cut, friendly, maybe a bit charming. The kind of man who greets guests personally, who makes sure everything is just right. The kind of man who would never, well, You shake the thought away. There's no reason to go there, no reason to think about it. And yet, as you continue walking, you notice something subtle. The further you move from the fairgrounds, the quieter it becomes. The lights don't reach as far, the sounds fade, the excitement thins out into something softer, more uncertain. And somehow, without really deciding to, you find yourself heading in that direction. The streets here feel different, still busy, but not the same kind of busy. Less wonder, more routine. People moving with purpose instead of curiosity. The glow of the white city now distant behind you. And then you see it again. That same building, closer this time. It looks even stranger up close. Windows placed at odd angles, sections that don't quite align. It's not broken or abandoned, it's functioning, clearly. But there's something off about it, like a puzzle that doesn't quite fit together. You pause across the street, watching it for a moment. A few people enter, none come out, at least not while you're standing there. Of course, that doesn't mean anything. People check in, they stay the night, they leave later. Completely normal. Still, there's a flicker of hesitation in your chest, because something about this place doesn't match the rest of the city. Not the bright optimism of the fair, not the bustling energy of Chicago. It feels separate, contained. And just for a second, you get the strange impression that this building isn't just a hotel, it's something else entirely. Something waiting. You take a slow breath, the night air cooler now, quieter. The distant hum of the fair barely reaches you here, and for the first time since arriving, you feel a slight chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Behind you, the white city glows, safe, bright, alive. In front of you, the building stands in silence, and somewhere inside it, a story is already unfolding. One that people won't fully understand for years, one that will turn this place into something far more infamous than anyone here could possibly imagine. Scholars still argue whether the truth was as horrifying as later reports claimed, or if the legend grew larger than the reality. But standing here now in the quiet shadow of that building, you can't help but feel like the truth, whatever it is waiting just behind those walls. And whether you realize it or not, you've already stepped a little too close.
You don't step inside. Not yet. Instead, you linger across the street, letting your eyes trace every strange angle of the building. The longer you look, the more it seems to resist understanding. Windows sit where they shouldn't, corners feel slightly misaligned. It's as if the structure was designed, and then redesigned, and then quietly altered again. And that's when you notice the sign. A hotel. Simple enough, respectable even, the kind of place a tired traveler might choose without a second thought, especially during something as overwhelming as the Chicago World's Fair. You tell yourself there's nothing unusual about that. Of course, there are hotels everywhere right now. The city is overflowing. People need beds, food, shelter. It's all completely normal. But then the door opens, and out steps a man who immediately draws your attention. Not because he looks dangerous, but because he doesn't. He's well-dressed, neatly groomed. There's a calm confidence in the way he carries himself, like someone who knows exactly how he's perceived. His posture is relaxed, his expression warm, almost inviting. You watch as he speaks to a couple near the entrance. He smiles, gestures politely, even tips his hat slightly. The couple seems reassured, nodding along as he speaks. Within moments, they follow him inside. Just like that. No hesitation, no second thoughts. And something about how easy that was sticks with you. This is Herman Webster Mudgett, though most people here know him by another name, H. Holmes. At this moment, though, he's just Dr. Holmes, a businessman, a hotel owner, a man of education and charm, the kind of person you'd trust instinctively, especially in a strange city far from home. You watch him reappear at the doorway, scanning the street briefly. For a split second, it feels like his gaze lingers in your direction. not long enough to be certain, but just long enough to make you look away. When you glance back, he's already gone, inside again. You shift your weight, suddenly aware of how quiet this part of the street feels compared to the fairgrounds. It's not empty, people still pass by, but the energy is different. Less wonder, more fatigue. Travelers dragging their feet, searching for rest. And that's exactly the kind of people Holmes seems to attract. Tired, trusting, temporary. You begin to walk again, slowly circling closer to the building without fully committing to approaching it. There's a pharmacy on the ground floor, another layer of respectability. A doctor running a pharmacy and a hotel? That sounds almost reassuring. In fact, Holmes really did study medicine. That's a real historical detail, one that adds to his credibility. He attended medical school and had enough training to understand the human body in ways most people didn't, which, under normal circumstances, would be comforting. But here, something about that knowledge feels misplaced. As you pass by the building, you catch a glimpse through one of the windows. Shelves, bottles, a counter neatly arranged, nothing unusual. And yet, you notice how quickly the view disappears. The glass is slightly tinted, the angle awkward. It's hard to see inside for more than a second or two, almost like it's not meant to be observed. You keep walking, but your thoughts stay behind. There's something about Holmes that doesn't quite align. He's too polished, too practiced. Every movement feels intentional, like he's playing a role he knows perfectly well. And maybe that's not unusual. After all, anyone running a business needs to be personable. Still, there's a difference between being friendly and being carefully constructed. You pause at the corner, glancing back one more time. Another guest enters, this time a young woman traveling alone. She hesitates briefly at the door, adjusting her bag. Holmes appears almost immediately, as if he's been expecting her. He smiles. She smiles back. And just like that, she disappears inside. No struggle, no alarm, just trust. It's almost unsettling how ordinary it looks. And that's the part that lingers with you the most. Because nothing here feels dramatic. There's no obvious danger, no raised voices, no signs of anything wrong. Just quiet, steady normalcy, which somehow feels worse. You exhale slowly, trying to shake the unease. Maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe this is just a man running a successful business during one of the busiest events of American history. After all, the World's Fair is bringing in millions of visitors. That's another real historical fact. Millions passed through Chicago during those months. It would be strange if someone like Holmes didn't take advantage of that opportunity. Still, there's a detail you can't quite ignore: the building itself. You've seen hotels before, plenty of them. They follow certain patterns: hallways, rooms, staircases, predictable layouts designed for comfort and convenience. But this one doesn't feel predictable. Even from the outside, you can tell something about its structure is off. Too many corners, too many sections. It almost feels like parts of it were added without a clear plan, like the building grew in pieces rather than as a whole. And then there's the rumor you overhear as you continue down the street. A worker speaking quietly to someone else. He mentions construction, changes, rooms being altered after they're already built, walls going up where they weren't before. It sounds inefficient, expensive, pointless, unless there was a reason. Scholars still argue whether Holmes truly designed the building with sinister intent from the beginning, or if the darker aspects developed gradually over time. But standing here now, watching people walk in without hesitation, it's hard not to wonder, because whatever the reason, this building wasn't made to be simple, and Holmes, well, he wasn't a simple man. There's an odd detail that drifts into your mind, something almost trivial yet strangely telling. Holmes was known to hire and fire workers frequently during construction. Different crews, different contractors, constantly changing. At first glance, it might seem like poor management,
but the more you think about it, the more it feels deliberate. If no one worker stays long enough to understand the full layout, then no one really knows what they're building. You stop walking. That thought lands heavier than you expect, because suddenly the building doesn't just feel strange, it feels intentional, carefully confusing, designed not just to house people, but to hide something. You turn slightly, looking back one last time. The door opens again. Holmes steps out, adjusting his coat, scanning the street with that same calm, controlled expression. For a brief moment, it feels like the entire scene slows down. The quiet street, the dim light, the distant glow of the fair, and him standing there, perfectly at ease. A man who belongs in both worlds, the bright promise of progress and the shadow just beyond it. He looks like someone you'd trust, someone you'd follow, someone you wouldn't question, and that, more than anything, might be the most unsettling part of all.
You don't remember deciding to come closer, but somehow you do. Your steps slow as you approach the building again, this time not from across the street, but directly along the sidewalk that leads to its entrance. The noise of the city feels distant here, like it's been turned down just enough to notice the silence underneath. Up close, the structure feels even more confusing. The walls rise at slightly uneven angles, windows interrupt each other in odd patterns, and the upper floors seem to stretch in ways that don't quite match the base. It's not broken, it's just wrong. And the more you look, the more you realize something unsettling. This building wasn't designed to make sense from the outside, which makes you wonder what it must feel like from the inside. The door creaks softly as someone exits, a man carrying a small suitcase. He looks tired, but otherwise normal. He adjusts his hat, glances around, and walks off into the street without noticing you. So people do leave. That should make you feel better. It doesn't, because for every person you see step out, you've watched several more step in, and you can't quite explain why that imbalance lingers in your mind. You drift past the entrance, not going in, just observing. There's a faint smell in the air, something chemical, almost medicinal. It's subtle, easy to ignore, but once you notice it, it's hard to forget. Of course, there's a pharmacy inside. That explains it. Bottles, compounds, prescriptions, perfectly reasonable. Still, it feels stronger than it should be. You keep walking, circling the building slowly, your curiosity pulling you along its perimeter. The sidewalls are even stranger, fewer windows, some boarded, others too small to be useful. And then you notice something that stops you completely. A door. Not at the front, not meant for guests, but along the side, half hidden. It looks like a service entrance, maybe used by workers or deliveries. Locked. Of course it is. But the way it's placed, the way it seems to lead into a part of the building that doesn't align with the rest, it leaves you with a quiet, creeping thought. There are rooms in there that don't belong. You step back, looking up at the higher floors again. The structure feels layered, almost like multiple buildings stitched together. Sections added, extended, reshaped. And suddenly, the earlier rumor clicks into place. Different builders, different plans, constant changes. It's not just inefficient construction, it's controlled confusion. An odd detail surfaces in your mind, something almost absurd. Some workers reportedly complained that doors would open into blank walls, that staircases would lead to nowhere, that certain hallways seemed to change between visits. At the time, it probably sounded like exaggeration, workers grumbling about poor planning. But standing here now, it doesn't feel exaggerated. It feels intentional. You move again, slower this time, your attention sharpening as if the building might reveal something if you just look long enough. A window catches your eye, one of the few that isn't obscured. You step closer, trying to see inside. At first, there's nothing unusual. A hallway, dimly lit, plain walls, a door at the far end. But then you notice how narrow it is. Too narrow for comfort. The kind of space that feels less like a passage and more like a corridor meant to guide you exactly where someone wants you to go. You blink, and the angle shifts. The view disappears again. Just like that. You exhale, stepping back. It's getting darker now, the faint glow of evening settling in, blending with the distant lights of the fair. The white city still shines, still calls to people with its promise of wonder. But here, the light doesn't reach the same way. And for the first time, you consider what it might be like to actually step inside this place, to walk those narrow hallways, to follow those strange, twisting paths, to trust that you'll find your way back out. It's a simple thought, but it carries weight, because deep down, you're not entirely sure you would. A soft sound pulls your attention, a cart being wheeled around the back of the building. You glance toward it, noticing a worker unloading something heavy. Crates, maybe. Supplies. Normal. Except for one detail. They're being taken not through the front, but through that side entrance you noticed earlier, the one that leads somewhere unclear. You watch as the worker knocks. The door opens just enough for someone inside to receive the crates. You don't see who it is. Just a hand, a quick exchange, then the door shuts again. Efficient, quiet, hidden. And suddenly, the building doesn't just feel strange anymore. It feels compartmentalized, like different parts exist for different purposes, without ever intersecting. Guests enter through the front, supplies through the side, and whatever happens inside stays inside. A chill settles in your chest, subtle but steady, because buildings like this aren't accidents, they're decisions. Every hallway, every door, every misplaced window, it all serves a purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious. And then there's Holmes. You haven't seen him again since earlier, but his presence lingers here, in the order of things, in the quiet efficiency, in the way everything seems controlled without being obvious. It's almost impressive, in a detached, unsettling way. A man who can create something this complex, this carefully layered, must understand exactly what he's doing. Scholars still argue whether Holmes was a criminal mastermind or simply an opportunist who adapted as he went. But standing here, looking at this building, it's hard not to feel like there's a plan behind it, something deliberate, something hidden. You take one last slow walk past the front entrance. The door opens again, as if on cue. A new guest steps inside, guided by that same calm, reassuring voice you heard earlier. Holmes is there again. Of course he is. Smiling, welcoming, completely at ease. And for a brief moment, you imagine what it would be like to meet him face to face, to hear that voice up close, to be reassured by it, to believe it. Because that's the thing about people like him. They don't force trust. They create it, effortlessly. You stop at the edge of the sidewalk, the building looming just behind you now. The fair glows faintly in the distance, a reminder of everything bright and hopeful just a few streets away. But here, you've stepped into something else entirely. Not darkness, exactly. Not yet. Just the edges of it. The beginning of a place that doesn't quite follow the rules of the world outside. And as you finally turn away, one quiet thought follows you into the night. Whatever's happening inside that building, it's only just beginning to take shape. You try to imagine the inside. Not just a hallway or a room, but the full layout, the way everything connects or doesn't. And the more you attempt to piece it together in your mind, the more it slips apart, like a puzzle missing its edges. Eventually, curiosity wins. Not enough to step inside, no, not yet, but enough to linger near the entrance again, just close enough to catch glimpses as the door opens and closes. A guest enters, the door swings inward, and for a brief second, you see it. A hallway stretching forward, then splitting. One path leads left, another right, and somewhere further in, a staircase rises, but at an angle that feels slightly off, like it wasn't meant to be there originally. Then the door shuts. Just a fragment of a layout, but enough to confirm what you already suspected. This place isn't built like a normal hotel. You shift closer, pretending to examine something along the street while your attention stays fixed on the entrance. Another guest exits this time, and again the door opens just long enough to reveal a different angle. A corridor this time, narrow, with doors spaced unevenly along the sides. And something else. No windows. You blink, but the view is gone before you can be sure. Still, that detail settles heavily in your mind, because hallways without windows feel different. They don't connect you to the outside world. They don't give you a sense of direction. They trap you in the interior. You step back, exhaling slowly. It's one thing to suspect something is strange. It's another to start seeing how it might work. The design isn't just unusual, it's disorienting. You begin to walk again, your thoughts filling in the gaps. What if those hallways twist further inside? What if doors don't lead where they're supposed to? What if staircases don't connect floors the way they should? An odd detail surfaces, one that sounds almost ridiculous at first. Some accounts claim there were doors that locked from the outside, but not from within. You pause mid-step. That's not just inconvenient, that's intentional. And suddenly, the building's purpose starts to shift in your mind. It's no longer just a place to stay. It's a place that controls movement, guides it, limits it, maybe even traps it. A faint breeze moves through the street, carrying with it that same chemical scent you noticed earlier. Stronger now, sharper. It drifts out from somewhere unseen, slipping into the open air before fading again. You glance toward the side of the building, toward that hidden entrance. Whatever's happening in there, it's not meant for guests to notice, and yet it's always just close enough to be felt. You take another slow step, your mind drifting deeper into the possibilities. Rooms that connect in strange ways, passages that loop back on themselves, spaces that seem normal until you realize they don't lead anywhere useful. It's like the building is playing a quiet game, one where you don't realize the rules until it's too late. A cart rattles somewhere nearby, pulling your attention back. Another worker passes by, not looking at you, not lingering, just moving with quiet purpose. Everyone here seems to know their role. Guests arrive, workers deliver, Holmes oversees, and the building does the rest. You stop again, this time near one of the darker windows. The glass reflects your faint outline, blending you with the shadows inside. For a moment, it almost feels like you're already part of the structure, another figure caught within its confusing design. You lean slightly, trying to see past the reflection. And then, just for a second, you catch something. A door, half open, leading into what looks like nothing. No room, no visible space beyond it, just darkness. Then the angle shifts, and it's gone. Your breath catches, just slightly. Because that didn't look like a normal doorway. It looked like an absence, a gap where something should be, but isn't. You step back quickly, your heartbeat just a little faster now. It could have been the lighting, a trick of perspective. It has to be. And yet, that image sticks with you.
because it fits too well with everything else. The uneven layout, the strange construction, the deliberate confusion. It all points to something beyond poor design, something planned. Scholars still argue whether the so-called murder castle was truly as elaborate as later stories suggest, or if some of its more bizarre features were exaggerated over time. But even if half of it is true, that's more than enough. You start to notice how the building affects the space around it, the way people approach it without hesitation and leave without looking back, the way no one lingers too long near its walls. It's subtle, almost subconscious, like something about the place quietly encourages movement. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't question. And most people don't. They see a hotel, a doctor, a place to rest. They don't see the hallways that don't make sense, the doors that don't lead anywhere, the spaces that feel wrong. You step back one last time, at the entrance. Holmes is there again, speaking with another guest. His voice is calm, measured, reassuring. You can't hear the words, but you don't need to. You already know the tone, the kind that puts people at ease, the kind that makes them trust without thinking. And as you watch him, a quiet realization settles in. The building doesn't need to force anything. It doesn't need to trap people physically, at least not at first, because Holmes does something far more effective. He invites them, and they walk in willingly, step by step, smile by smile, until the moment they're too deep inside to understand where they are or how to leave. You turn away slowly, the weight of that thought following you like a shadow. The fair still glows in the distance, untouched, unaware. But here, just beyond its reach, something far more intricate is taking shape. A structure that isn't just built of wood and brick, but of misdirection, control, and quiet, deliberate design. And the deeper you think about it, the more it feels like every hallway inside that building leads to the same place, even if you don't know where that place is yet. You try to leave it behind. Really, you do. You turn your back on the building, letting your steps carry you toward the brighter streets again, toward the distant glow of the fair where everything feels safer, louder, more alive. And for a moment, it almost works. The sound of laughter returns. The hum of electricity fills the air. The illusion of comfort settles back in. But your mind doesn't follow. It stays there, circling that building. Because once you've noticed something like that, once you've felt that quiet wrongness, you don't just forget it. And then you start noticing something else. Not the building this time, but the people, specifically the ones who aren't here anymore. At first, it's subtle, a passing comment, someone mentioning a friend who hasn't returned yet, a traveler expected to meet up who never quite showed. It's easy to dismiss. This is a massive event, millions of people moving through the city. It's chaotic, disorganized. People get separated all the time. That's normal. It has to be normal. But then the pattern starts to feel just a little too consistent. You overhear a woman asking about her sister. She describes her, what she was wearing, where she planned to stay. There's worry in her voice, but not panic. Not yet. Because she still believes there's a reasonable explanation, a delay, a misunderstanding, a simple mistake. And that's the unsettling part. No one jumps to the worst conclusion. No one assumes anything terrible has happened, because nothing here looks terrible. The fair is still shining. The city is still moving. Life is still normal. You slow your steps, listening more closely now. Another conversation. This time, a man talking about a coworker who came to Chicago for the fair and hasn't been heard from since. He shrugs it off, but there's a flicker of confusion in his tone. It's not fear, it's uncertainty. And that uncertainty spreads quietly, like a ripple no one fully acknowledges.
You find yourself drifting back again, back toward the quieter streets, back toward that building, not because you want to, but because something about it feels connected. And deep down, you already suspect why. When you reach it, nothing has changed. The same dim presence, the same quiet entrance, the same sense that everything happening here is perfectly ordinary on the surface. A couple walks in, guided by that familiar, reassuring figure. Holmes greets them with a polite nod, a small smile. You can almost hear the tone of his voice again, calm, professional, welcoming. There's no hesitation. Why would there be? He's exactly what he appears to be, a doctor, a businessman, a man offering comfort in a crowded, overwhelming city. And yet, you start to see it differently now, because those missing people, they had to stay somewhere, they had to trust someone, and Holmes makes trust feel effortless. That realization settles heavily in your chest, because it reframes everything. This isn't about force, it's about access, opportunity, a steady stream of people passing through, many of whom won't be missed immediately. Travelers, workers, visitors with no deep ties to the city, people who can disappear quietly. There's a strange, almost mundane detail that surfaces as you think about it. Holmes was known to take out insurance policies on people, sometimes even on his own employees. At the time, it might have seemed like clever business, or at worst, a little unethical. But paired with everything else, it feels darker, more calculated. You watch the building again, your gaze sharper now, less curious and more aware. The windows that reveal nothing, the side entrance that hides movement, the structure that refuses to make sense. It all fits together in a way that's difficult to ignore. And then there's the people inside, the ones who walked in willingly. You imagine them now, checking in, setting down their bags, maybe even feeling relieved to have found a place to stay, maybe even feeling lucky. A quiet room, a polite host, a sense of safety after a long day. It's almost comforting to picture, until you let that image continue, because what happens next isn't something anyone sees coming. You shift slightly, your attention drawn to a small detail near the entrance. A guest speaking briefly with Holmes, asking something, directions maybe, or a request about their room. Holmes listens carefully, nods, responds with calm assurance. Always calm, always in control. And that's when it clicks. This isn't just about the building, it's about him understanding it completely. Every hallway, every door, every hidden turn. He doesn't get lost inside it because he designed it that way, for himself, not for the people staying there. A faint unease tightens in your chest as you consider that, because if the building is confusing from the outside, it must be disorienting from within. And if someone inside needed help, needed to find their way out, would they even know where to go? Or would every choice lead them deeper into the same maze? Scholars still argue whether Holmes acted alone in all of this, or if others suspected or even assisted without fully understanding what was happening. But standing here, watching him move so effortlessly through this environment, it's hard to imagine anyone else having the same level of control. This is his space, his design, his system, and the people who enter it, they become part of it. You take a slow step back, the weight of that thought pressing quietly against your mind. The fair's distant glow feels further away now, like it belongs to another world entirely. Because here, the story is different. Here, people arrive, and sometimes they don't leave. Not in any way that anyone notices right away, not in any way that raises alarms. Just quiet absences, small gaps in the flow of a crowded city, easy to overlook, easy to explain away, until they start to add up. And as you stand there, watching another guest disappear through that door, one final realization settles in, slow, steady, impossible to ignore.
This isn't just a building with strange hallways. It's a place designed to make people vanish without anyone realizing it's happening.
You can feel it now, that quiet shift in the air. What once felt like a vague unease has settled into something heavier, something harder to ignore. The building isn't just strange anymore. It's a question, one that the city hasn't quite asked yet, but is slowly, inevitably getting closer to. Because disappearances, no matter how quiet, don't stay invisible forever. At first, it's just whispers, a missing person here, another there, stories that don't quite line up, someone who checked in but never checked out, someone last seen near a certain part of town, near this building. You find yourself standing at a distance again, no longer circling, no longer pretending this is casual curiosity. You're watching now, observing with intent. And you're not the only one. There's a subtle change in how people move around this place. Nothing obvious, no crowds gathering, no accusations shouted, but a slight hesitation, a pause before entering, a glance over the shoulder before stepping inside. Doubt has started to creep in, slowly, quietly, but it's there. And Holmes, he notices. Of course he does. You see it in the way he adjusts his approach, still calm, still polite, but sharper now, more attentive, as if he's carefully maintaining the illusion, reinforcing it wherever it begins to crack. A reassuring word here, a friendly gesture there, just enough to keep everything running smoothly. Because as long as people keep trusting him, nothing else matters. You shift your focus to the building itself again, seeing it differently now, not as a curiosity, but as evidence. The strange layout, the hidden sections, the constant modifications, they're not just oddities, they're clues. And eventually, someone starts putting them together. The exact moment is hard to pinpoint. There's no dramatic reveal, no single discovery that changes everything overnight. Instead, it builds, piece by piece, suspicion stacking on top of suspicion, until it becomes impossible to ignore. A report filed, a question raised, a connection made, and suddenly the quiet pattern of disappearances starts to look less like coincidence and more like something deliberate. You imagine the first investigators approaching this place, not with certainty, but with doubt, with questions. They don't see a murder castle. Not yet. They see a hotel, a business, a respectable establishment run by a well-spoken doctor. And that's what makes it difficult, because nothing about Holmes screams guilt. In fact, he does the opposite. He cooperates, answers questions, maintains that same calm, composed demeanor, the kind that makes you second-guess your own suspicions. Could this really be the man responsible? It doesn't feel right. And yet, the building remains, unexplainable, uncooperative in its own way. Investigators step inside, and for the first time you allow yourself to imagine what they experience, not as an outsider looking in, but as someone walking those halls. The confusion hits immediately. Corridors that twist unexpectedly, doors that open into unfamiliar spaces, staircases that don't seem to connect logically between floors. It's disorienting, even when you know you're supposed to be looking for something. And that's when the deeper unease begins to settle in, because this isn't just a poorly designed building. It resists understanding. It slows you down, forces you to question your own sense of direction. And in a place like this, that matters. An odd detail emerged from accounts of the investigation, something almost surreal. Some rooms were found to be completely sealed, no visible entrances, no clear purpose, just enclosed spaces, hidden within the structure itself. You pause on that thought, because rooms like that aren't accidents, they're decisions, carefully planned, carefully executed. And whatever they were used for, it wasn't something meant to be seen. You picture investigators moving deeper inside, mapping the space, trying to make sense of it.
their initial skepticism slowly giving way to something else, something colder. Realization. Because the deeper they go, the less this place feels like a hotel, and the more it feels like a system, a controlled environment where every element serves a purpose. Holmes is still there, of course, present, cooperative, watching it all unfold with that same measured calm. But there's something different now, not in his expression, but in how it's perceived. Because once suspicion takes hold, even the most reassuring smile starts to feel rehearsed. And suddenly, every detail matters. Every missing person, every strange architectural choice, every unexplained alteration, they all begin to point in the same direction, toward him. Scholars still argue about the full extent of Holmes's crimes, how many victims there truly were, how much of the building's legend is fact versus exaggeration. But the investigation itself, that was very real, and once it began, there was no going back. You take a slow step away from the building, your perspective shifting once more. Because now it's no longer just a place of quiet unease, it's a place on the edge of exposure, the moment just before everything comes into the light. And yet, there's something unsettling about that too, because even as the truth starts to surface, you can't help but wonder how much of it will actually be understood, how much will remain hidden in those walls, lost in their confusing design, how much will never be fully uncovered. You glance back one last time. The building stands as it always has, silent, still, giving nothing away. But now, the silence feels different, heavier, because it's no longer hiding comfortably in the shadows. It's being looked at, questioned, unraveled, and somewhere inside, the truth is waiting, not for long.
You feel it before you fully understand it. That quiet sense of something ending. Not the kind of ending that comes with closure or relief, but the kind that leaves behind questions, fragments, and a lingering unease that doesn't quite settle. Because now, everything is catching up. The whispers have turned into accusations, the questions into investigations, and the man who once stood at that doorway, smiling so easily, welcoming guests without hesitation, is no longer just a respectable doctor. He's something else entirely. H. Holmes is no longer simply a name spoken in passing. It's a name carried with suspicion, with disbelief, with a growing sense of horror as more details begin to surface. You imagine the moment it all begins to collapse. Not dramatically, not all at once, but piece by piece. A contradiction here, a lie there, stories that don't align, and eventually the weight of it becomes too much to ignore. Holmes is arrested, but not immediately for everything that happened inside that building. In fact, like many things in this story, the path to justice isn't straightforward. It winds, it delays, it circles around the truth before finally landing on it. At first, it's fraud, insurance schemes, financial deception, the kind of crimes that are easier to prove, easier to explain. But behind those charges, something far darker is waiting. You picture him now, no longer standing in the doorway of his hotel, but sitting in a cell, the same man, the same calm expression, the same controlled demeanor, as if nothing has changed. And that's what unsettles you the most, because even when everything starts to unravel, he doesn't. There's an eerie composure to him, a sense that he's still in control of the narrative in some way. He speaks carefully, admits certain things, denies others, sometimes contradicts himself entirely, almost as if the truth itself is something he can shape. And in a way, he does. Confessions come, but they're inconsistent. Numbers change, details shift, stories evolve. At one point, Holmes claims dozens of victims, at another, far fewer. Scholars still argue whether his confessions were truthful, exaggerated, or intentionally misleading, perhaps a final attempt to maintain control,
even as everything else slipped away. Because that's the thing about someone like him. The story doesn't end cleanly. It can't. Too many unknowns, too many pieces that don't quite fit. You let your thoughts drift back to the building, the so-called murder castle. By now, it's no longer just a quiet, confusing structure on the edge of the fairgrounds. It's something else entirely. A symbol, a headline, a place people talk about in hushed tones, trying to reconcile what it might have been with what it now represents. Investigators comb through it, documenting what they can. Rooms, hallways, hidden spaces, each discovery adding another layer to the story. But even then, it's incomplete, because a building like that doesn't give up its secrets easily. Some parts are destroyed, others altered. Time itself begins to erode the details, blurring the line between what was truly there and what people later imagined. And that's where the legend begins to grow, because when reality is this strange, it doesn't stay contained. It expands. Stories spread. Details become exaggerated. The building becomes more complex, more terrifying in retellings. Secret chambers multiply. Traps become more elaborate. And somewhere along the way, the truth gets tangled with the myth. You stand at a distance again, in your mind, looking at where the building once stood. It's quieter now, not just in sound, but in presence. Because whatever it was, it's over. Holmes' trial comes, and eventually so does his sentence, execution, a final official end to the man at the center of it all. A real historical moment. He is executed in 1896, just a few years after the fair that brought so many people to his doorstep. And yet, it doesn't feel like an ending. Not really, because the questions remain. How much of it was planned from the beginning? How many people truly passed through those doors and never returned? How much of the building's design was as sinister as it's been described, and how much has been shaped by the stories told afterward? There are no clear answers, only possibilities. And that's what lingers. Not just the horror of what might have happened, but the uncertainty of what we'll never fully know. You take one last look in your mind, the quiet street, the dim outline of that strange, impossible building, the doorway where Holmes once stood, greeting guests with a smile that promised comfort. It's almost easy to imagine it as something ordinary again. Just a hotel, just a man, just a moment in history. But you know better now, because you've seen the edges of it, felt the way it doesn't quite fit together. And once you notice that, you can't unsee it. The fair fades, the city moves on, but the story stays. Not loud, not obvious, just there, waiting in the background like a shadow that doesn't quite disappear. Now the night feels quieter again, the kind of quiet that settles in slowly, wrapping around your thoughts, softening the sharper edges of everything you've just imagined. The bright lights of the fair are gone now, fading into the distance, leaving behind only a gentle darkness that feels still. You're no longer standing outside that building, no longer watching those doors. Instead, you drift somewhere calmer, somewhere distant from the noise, from the questions, from the weight of it all. Because stories like these, they don't need to follow you into rest. They can stay behind. You can leave them there, on that quiet street, in that strange moment in time, while you step away into something softer. Imagine the hum of a fan in the background, steady and comforting, the kind of sound that fills the silence without asking anything from you. Your breathing slows, matching that rhythm without effort. In and out. Nothing to figure out, nothing to solve. Just the simple feeling of being here, safe, present, and far removed from anything unsettling. The details fade first, then the images, and finally, even the story itself begins to blur, like something half-remembered, drifting further away with each passing second. All that's left is the quiet, and maybe a sense of calm curiosity tucked gently in the back of your mind. But for now, you don't need to follow it. For now, just rest. Let the night settle. Let the stillness take over. And slowly, gently, let go.